Hi, everybody. This is Eric Murray from the sugarhuddle.com. This is my first YouTube video. My YouTube account is just simply Eric Murray, ERICMURRAY. I've had 3 blog posts so far for the sugarhuddle.com. Check it out. It's the off season. It's pretty slow, but it's a college football and NFL channel or NFL website, and so far it's just been NFL posts. Once it gets closer to the season, obviously I hope to start doing a lot more posts pretty much on a daily basis for college and NFL, or, every other day, whatever. But I've had 3 posts on the sugarhuddle.com, like I mentioned, and just kind of want to talk about them. I had a couple posts a few weeks back, and I had a post a few days ago. My first post was about the NFL's new National Anthem policy. I don't really like to get too political with sports. I'm kind of one of those, stick to sports kind of people. But, it's the off season. There's not a whole hell of a lot to talk about. So I thought it was kind of interesting to talk about that. And then my second post was about Dez Bryant and how he's pretty much screwing himself in free agency. And then a few days ago, I had a post about Jameis Winston's 3-game suspension. So let's work backwards and start with the National Anthem policy. Basically, in my blog post, I was talking about how the NFL tends to operate in gray areas. So many of their rules over the years, there's always a gray area. It's left open for interpretation. Perfect example, you think about the last, roughly decade with the catch rule, a rule that's been so controversial, has cost a lot of teams a lot of games, and they finally changed that rule this offseason, but it was such a gray area rule where nobody really knew what a catch was in the NFL for about a decade, and it's just something that really kind of turned a lot of people off. And as we all know, the National Anthem situation, with players kneeling and half the fans feeling one way and half the fans feeling another way, obviously it's been a very divisive issue, and it's an issue that is making a lot of people not really like the NFL very much anymore. I mean, the ratings are, slowly starting to go downhill. You can see the on-site attendance is not great at a lot of places. So we'll see if the NFL can salvage itself, like it always finds a way to do, because everybody loves the NFL. But the last couple of years have been rough. The on-field product hasn't been very good, but more than that, as far as this policy, as we know, it started back in 2016 with the whole National Anthem situation with Colin Kaepernick, who was then the 49ers quarterback. He started kneeling for the National Anthem in the 2016 preseason, trying to protest what he said was police violence against black people. And really at that point, if you're the NFL, it was a media firestorm from the get-go. And if you were Roger Goodell, I mean, all you really had to do was call in Colin Kaepernick immediately, and bring him to New York and tell him, hey, you can't be doing this, or we're gonna have to find some kind of compromise. If you're the NFL owners, you should have jumped on it right away and tried to shut it down. And it's funny because my boss at my day job, he's a big NBA guy, and one of the things he said, which I thought was spot on, is if it was Adam Silver, he would have brought Kaepernick in the very next day, and he would have again come to some sort of compromise or common ground, or just put his foot down and said, you can't be doing this anymore. And we know with Roger Goodell, he's not a great communicator. There's a lot of distrust between him and the players union, and obviously the players in general. But yeah, I mean, the NFL just dropped the ball completely on that, and they continue to keep denying that the anthem protests were the reason why there were some ratings issues and things for the last couple of years. They kept trying to find these excuses. Back in 2016, they blamed the presidential debates, but even after the debates, they still had piss poor ratings. And last year, it was another year where the ratings continued to keep going down, and it's just one of those deals that the NFL and the NFL owners, they had all these opportunities to put some sort of rule in place about the national anthem because it becomes such a big thing. And what ended up happening is they just continued to divide the fan base more and more and just alienate more and more fans. And finally, this off season, within the last couple months, or a few months, whatever it was, they had this new national anthem policy in place where they said that all players must stand for the national anthem on the field, or they also have the option to remain in the locker room. But the problem is they left a gray area again because they didn't say, well, we've seen a lot of these players like Malcolm Jenkins and some of these other guys, Marcus Peters, who raise their fists like a Black Power salute, and the NFL hasn't said you can't do that. And that's something that a lot of people who were against the national anthem protests, they were against stuff like that too. So it's like you're still leaving it open for interpretation, and you're still ticking off a lot of people in your fan base. And the people who are in favor of the players protesting, they're even more ticked off. So it's like you have I don't want to say 100% of your fan base mad at you and kind of against you because people still love the NFL, but I mean there's a lot of people ticked off. And again, the NFL just left open a gray area, and sit on your hands for 2 years, and this is what you get. And now they've actually made things worse for themselves. My personal opinion, I just think you should stand for the national anthem. I get why some of these guys are protesting, but I also think there's other ways to protest. But at the same time, I mean, when I look at this rule, I just kind of think, things were kind of calming down towards the end of last season, and then they pull out this rule, and now it's like it's things are going to get worse again, and players are going to probably find different ways to protest, to really rail against the league. And you got these owners that aren't even like on the same page. You have Art Rooney from the Steelers who talked about how these players should stand. It's disrespectful, if you're protesting or the anthem in any way. I think is essentially what he kind of said in a nutshell. And then you have Chris Johnson, the owner of the Jets, who said he would pay these fines, because if the rule says essentially that if any player protests during the anthem and the team gets fined, and Chris Johnson of the Jets said, I don't care, I want my players to express themselves. So you have all these owners that are not on the same page. They're usually fairly united on a lot of things. They haven't really been on the same page the last year or two. And if you're the players, I mean, the NFL players usually don't have a whole lot of leverage when it comes to negotiating with the league, especially these collective bargaining agreements. And we know the CBA is up in 2021. It might be 3 years, but trust me, those 3 years go by fast, and that's why they've already been kind of in discussions the past year or two, because they know they don't want it to be an 11th hour last minute situation. And last time we had a lockout in 2011, it canceled the Hall of Fame game. That was the only preseason game affected. It did hurt, some of the training camp and preseason preparation. But you're in a situation where the divide between the players and the owners, the distrust in this league from the top down, starting with Roger Goodell, you could have a legitimate strike in 2021. And obviously it's not going to cancel a Super Bowl or nothing like that, but it's something that could cancel the first 2-3 weeks of the regular season. I mean, imagine an entire training camp wiped out and possibly 2 or 3 regular season games wiped out. It might not sound like a lot, but for the NFL that would be bad, especially if the next 3 years leading up to that, if they're continuing to have these image issues and they're continuing to have fans are starting to kind of go away from their game and starting to look for something else, that could be really, really bad for the NFL. So that's kind of what I talked about in my first blog post. But anyhow, so we'll see if there's still a lot of protests this year during the anthem. Myself, speaking on behalf of a number of fans, we want football to be an escape. But the problem with the NFL is there's been just so many issues, even if it's just a small amount of players, personal conduct, or the league shooting themselves in the foot because of this whole anthem thing and other rules they tend to throw in there. and then of course the quality of play. I mean, everybody's built to go 8-8, and it's been very, very mediocre. A lot of the on-field play that we've seen from so many teams the last couple of years. I mean, it's not as exciting to watch. And we just saw 4 full-time referees retire. So then you wonder, is the officiating going to be even worse next year? There's a lot of things, and we'll kind of get into that down the line. But as far as this video goes, that's kind of it as far as the national anthem part of it. But then, my second story that I had for the sugarhuddle.com was just about Dez Bryant. And, he got offered a 3-year, $21 million deal with the Ravens a while back after Dallas cut him. And, his last contract, I can't remember what it was. I think it was like 5 years, $70 million. It was a pretty big contract that he got with Dallas several years back. And when you go from that to being offered 3 years, $21 million, and I don't think he's even turned 30 yet. I can understand from that point of view why he'd be like, nah. But at the same time, you got to realize, I mean, he hasn't been very, very good the last few years, since 2015. I mean, I think he has, I'd have to go back and look at the stats. I think he has one more touchdown in 2014 alone than he's had the last 3 years combined. I think it was like 17 to 16, or it might have been one more touchdown the last 3 years combined compared to 2016. I mean, that's how big of a drop off his production's been. Hasn't had any 1,000-yard receiving seasons. His receptions are way down. A lot of that is because he really hasn't, been able to kind of develop and diversify his game over the years. He's a guy that continues to struggle to create separation. He's a guy that not only does he struggle to consistently get open, but when he does get open or open enough to catch a ball targeted at him, we've seen him drop it a lot. And you think about last year alone. You think about the Denver game, and you think about the Seattle game, which eliminated them from the playoffs. That was in their own stadium. That was in Jerry World. Those 2 games, he had dropped passes that deflected off his hands and led to interceptions. I think the Denver one, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was a pick 6 by Chris Harris. But either way, those were 2 costly drops on his part, leading to turnovers. And if you're Dallas, I mean, you can't have that. I mean, the problem with Dez Bryant, as we know, is he's kind of a Terrell Owens type as far as being a head case, fighting on the sidelines occasionally with coaches or teammates. He's gotten on Dallas's franchise quarterback, the young Dak Prescott, quite a bit these last couple years. You don't want that if you're Dallas. Dallas, of course, we know that Jerry loves the drama, and he takes on a lot of players with character issues and all these other things, but you can't have that. That's just too toxic, and he's not worth the risk. The NFL is a league where even if you have off-the-field issues, or you have issues as far as getting into it with coaches and what have you, if the talent's worth the headache, they'll say, okay, we'll tolerate it for a little while. But if the talent's not there anymore, if you haven't been producing, then they're going to say basically to hell with you. And that's pretty much what Dallas had to do, even though their receiving core isn't very good and they didn't really do much this offseason to fix things. Sadly, they're still better off without Dez, to be honest with you. But anyways, basically in that story I just talked about, in one sense, yeah, you can understand why he turned down Baltimore, but based on being a declining player, I mean, anywhere else, he's probably only going to get like a 1-year prove-it type deal, and it's probably going to be less than $7 million a year. It's going to be heavily incentivized, and even then, he's not getting any interest, any offers. I think, if guys start dropping like flies in preseason, like we see, in training camp quite a bit between ACLs, things like that, then somebody will probably bring him in and sign him. But I still feel 3 years, $21 million with Baltimore. I don't know how much of it was guaranteed, but I'm sure at least the first year was fully guaranteed, probably. But at any rate, I just think that would have been his best option. I mean, I know, Joe Flacco is not that great of a quarterback, and Lamar Jackson, we'll see. But I still think just Baltimore in general, you've got a team that's ready to get back in the playoffs, should have been in the playoffs last year and make some noise. And, I mean, he might teams that actually show interest in him at some point, if they do, could be bad teams. So I just kind of felt like Baltimore was his best option, but a lot of these teams are basically saying we're not interested in you. You know, New England, they've taken chances on older, washed-up receivers, and occasionally it's worked, but a lot of times it hasn't worked. Well, they're not interested in Dez. You know, they have enough problems of their own, and they really don't need a guy like Dez in their locker room. Green Bay, where a lot of people said his career kind of died back in that 2014 divisional playoff game in January of 2015. You know, it was a touchdown catch, and the NFL admits that now, but they said at the time it wasn't. Anyhow, they don't have an interest in him, and we know they need some receiver help. Dez basically wanted to stay in the NFC East to try to spite the Cowboys, and he really wanted a team like the Giants to show interest in him. They have no interest. Redskins have no interest. Eagles, I mean, defending Super Bowl champions, why would they bring him into their locker room? They definitely don't need him. They've got a lot of depth and a good amount of depth at receiver. I mean, better receivers than Dez at this point, I guess. Whatever. But so all these different teams, AFC, NFC, really just don't have an interest in him, it seems like. And so it's looking with each passing day, especially depending on what happens in training camp, that Dez should have just taken the 3-year deal, even if he only wanted, it was reported he only wanted the 1-year prove-it deal. But I don't know if he's going to get offered $21 million worth of salary guaranteed or not over these next 3 years. And I could see a scenario where he ends up retiring, possibly. I mean, he's about to turn 30, I think, sometime this year. But yeah, he might end up retiring. I mean, I we'll see. It'll be interesting. He might have to sit out a year. I don't know. But yeah, and then finally, a few days back, earlier this week, I wrote a story about Jameis Winston. Of course, as everybody knows by now, he got suspended 3 games by the NFL. A lot of people thought that was a compromise because, based on his situation, you would think that would fall under the 6-game personal conduct rule, 6-game suspension for violating the personal conduct policy. And instead, the NFL only gave him 3 games. And, when you think of, the Tom Brady situation, which was considered personal conduct, 6 games for Deflategate, and that got reduced to 4 and was fought in court for over a year, and he still had to serve 4 games. And then you think more recently, Ezekiel Elliott, last year, he ended up having to serve the full 6 after trying to go through a court battle, and it was a big headache and a big to-do. And obviously Elliott, like Winston's, their situations are much more serious than Tom Brady, obviously. But at any rate, Ezekiel Elliott, it was a serious situation, accused of domestic violence by a former girlfriend. And a lot of people say, the evidence wasn't really clear and concrete, and the NFL still handed down that suspension. Well, Jameis Winston, here's a guy who was accused of rape in college, wasn't charged, but there was a lot of shadiness as far as the investigation by kind of the local and campus police and all that. And, he had other incidents in college, and here he is in the NFL, has this incident that came out, I think it was early last season, but the incident itself was in 2016 when he was in Phoenix, Arizona. He groped a female Uber driver, and basically, I mean, obviously there were charges pressed at the time, and we still don't know why there weren't any charges pressed, why she didn't report to the police. Who knows? But the story came out last year. NFL's been investigating it, but I think most people assumed if they came down on him, it would be personal conduct, 6 games. Well, the reason he's only getting 3 games is the NFL is only suspending him for failure to report an allegation against him. So they're not even coming down on the personal conduct policy. Well, a lot of people think that basically the NFL compromised with Jameis Winston. Basically, they know something happened, but they don't have the great evidence, and they don't want to go through like a court battle. And so basically they kind of negotiate or compromise with Jameis Winston in his camp, and then they said, okay, we'll take 3 games. You get 0 games, you get 6 games. We'll split the difference and just give them 3. So, a lot of people are pretty ticked off about that. Not very, very happy with the NFL. The NFL, with all its image issues and everything else. And this seemed like a more likely case where you could suspend somebody for the 6 games for the personal conduct. In this case, it feels like they're dropping the ball again. So, but in the article I wrote, I kind of, I talked a lot about that. And I talked about Jameis Winston's character and all the problems he's had. But what I kind of incorporated in the article was actually about Tampa Bay's situation itself, because there's some saying, should they cut Jameis Winston? Jameis Winston's in the fourth and final year of his rookie deal. Sorry. But anyways, he's in the fourth and final year of his rookie deal. They did pick up his fifth-year rookie option back in April. That's a $20.9 million option for 2019, but that option is actually only guaranteed for injury, so they can cut him loose before then, and they wouldn't have to pay him anything. But the final year of his rookie deal, because with the way the rookie draft picks, the top guys like Jameis, who was the number 1 overall pick in 2015, you get like that huge signing bonus up front. His contract, I think it was 4 years, 25 million. I think it was 25 million and change, fully guaranteed. Usually the top 5 or 10 overall picks are fully guaranteed 4-year deals. And I can't remember the exact number, but I know that a big chunk of it was signing bonus, like 15, 16 million. And then the rest of that, is spread out over 4 years, which wouldn't be very much as far as average annual value. And I looked it up, and apparently his base salary for this year is just $705,000 fully guaranteed. And there's incentives and other bonuses, and I think with all that he could make something like $4 million. But the only thing that's guaranteed is that $700,000+. So if you're the Bucs, it makes a lot of sense to just really cut him loose. You're only eating $700,000. That's chump change for an NFL owner. But the problem is it's a very complicated case, and another gray area case. Again, not surprisingly because it's the NFL, but another gray area case with a lot of shades of gray, or in this case because it's Bucs, shades of pewter. But it's a situation where you're the Bucs. You took him number 1 overall, and as serious as it is from a social standpoint, again, he was accused of rape in college, and there's still a lot of people who think that he did something. He had other incidents in college, stealing crab legs and, yelling immature phrases. And just, when you're the quarterback, you're the CEO of that of your franchise in the NFL, and you just can't behave like that. And, a lot of people obviously are still kind of on Baker Mayfield for, when he got arrested by police in Arkansas, but that pales in comparison to the things that Jameis Winston was doing in college. And the reality is you just can't act like that. Any NFL prospect or any NFL player, but in particular quarterback. And so the thing about it is, all throughout the draft process, what is it? Jameis Winston is a Marcus Mariota, who goes number 1 overall back in 2015, and most people kind of lean towards Winston, even with the off-field stuff, and that's obviously how Tampa was leaning, and they took Winston number 1 overall. But the thing about it is, he had all these problems in college, and you would have thought that maybe Tampa would have said, maybe with Marcus Mariota right there, maybe we should just go with Mariota, and then Winston could be Tennessee's problem or Cleveland's problem, or whoever else wants to draft him. But they go with Winston, and I think a big part of the reason why Tampa felt comfortable taking the chance on Winston is, for the simple fact that there wasn't an uproar from the Buccaneers fan base. There wasn't an uproar from corporate partners that partner with Tampa Bay, with the Buccaneers. So if you don't have that uproar, if you don't have that public backlash, you had that whole draft process, and if you're the Bucs, you say, okay, well, I guess it's okay to take him. And talent-wise, coming into the NFL, yeah, Jameis Winston, I thought he had a chance to be an all-time great quarterback. That's how much talent he had in college and how much he showed in college. And so from a talent standpoint, I mean, nobody can blame them for taking him number one overall. It's just when you have that kind of off-field stuff, you're like, we're going to have to pass on him. Even though he's quarterback and everything else, we're going to have to pass on him. But again, they didn't have any kind of backlash from the fans, from the corporate partners, anything that would hurt their bottom line. So they said, okay, we're going to take Jameis Winston number one overall. We're going to take a major chance here and hope that he grows up fast and gets his act together. And his first couple years in the league, 2015, 2016, not only did he show a lot of growth and a lot of improvement, they won more games and everything else, but there wasn't really, he didn't get into any kind of trouble really. And so, you kind of thought, okay, well, maybe he grew up. Remember Ben Roethlisberger, got into a lot of trouble early in his career with the Steelers. He had those two separate rape allegations. Nothing became of those, but two separate rape allegations. And I don't think it was back-to-back off seasons. I think it was like 2 out of 3. And then he wrecked his motorcycle one off season. But he, that was several years ago, and he got past that. And granted, he had won a Super Bowl in between, so that kind of justified for the Steelers to keep him around. But nonetheless, he was able to get his act together this past, I guess, decade or so. But the case of Jameis Winston, okay, the first couple of years go by and you don't hear anything, so you think, okay, well, I guess he gets it, and so now it just comes down to what he does on the field. Well, then early last season, all this hype, a lot of people thought the Bucs were going to be a playoff team. I thought they were going to go 10-6, 11-5, and make the playoffs. I thought Jameis was going to be a dark horse MVP type candidate. They had a really good 2016. They went 9-7. They fell apart down the stretch and missed the playoffs, just like they did in 2015. But nonetheless, everybody thought it was going to be a breakthrough year in 2017. But then guess what happens? The whole report, involving him and the female Uber driver, that comes out. I want to say it was early last season. It might have been closer to midseason. I think it was early last season. But anyways, from the very beginning, the season was a disaster. Jameis missed 3 games due to a shoulder injury. I think he characterized it as a tired arm, but some thought it was more serious. Who knows? But he missed the 3 games in between. They were 3-10 with him. They were actually 2-1 without him, which isn't great for Jameis, especially when it's somebody like Ryan Fitzpatrick that's outperforming him. But nonetheless, it was a disastrous year from the entire team. Yet they still brought back their head coach for this year, Dirk Cutter, that a lot of people don't really believe in. And I kind of got the vibe that Tampa brought Cutter back thinking that, okay, him and Jameis, you got us into this mess, you're going to get us out of it, or else we're going to get rid of both of you. And I think part of the reason why Cutter got brought back too is maybe Tampa was anticipating that Jameis would get suspended this year based on that investigation that started early last year. And maybe they were just feeling that, okay, Jameis might be suspended part of next year and it might be a lost season. And there's a lot of people now that think that Tampa is going to be, if not the worst team in the league, they're going to be down there. And so anyways, the point is, if you're Tampa, I mean, what do you do? Like I said, I mean, I would just cut Jameis and move on, because it doesn't feel like they're going to keep him for 2019 and beyond. So why not just get rid of him now? I mean, a lot of people think they're going to have a lost season anyways. I know it's tough because this is well after the draft and free agency, so you couldn't go out and get a quarterback, and you're stuck with Ryan Fitzpatrick as your starter for the first 3 games at least, and then possibly all 16 if you decide to cut Jameis. But I just kind of think that Tampa's in a situation where they just need to cut bait with Jameis and let this be a lost season and win 3, 4, 5 games with Fitzpatrick if he plays the whole year. Maybe they'll trade for somebody in training camp, Sam Bradford, maybe they'll trade for him if Josh Rosen beats him out in Arizona or something like that. But anyways, the point is, Tampa, you might as well treat it as a lost season and put yourself in position to get a high draft pick next year. Now, there aren't really any quarterbacks in line to be number 1 pick. There's all these talented defensive linemen, but you got to do something about this. But my gut feeling is, And I don't know the exact details about the 50-year option. Like I said, I know it's only guaranteed for injury, but I don't know if he gets injured in 2018, if that affects that. I think it only goes into effect at a certain point, the guaranteed for injury, a certain point in 2019. So I think if he gets hurt in 2018, it wouldn't matter. But I have the feeling what Tampa is going to probably do is they'll stick with Jameis this year, unless there's some kind of like public outcry from the Tampa fan base, not national, but from the actual Buccaneer fan base, and from the corporate partners of the Buccaneers. Unless there's a real outcry and they feel this pressure to cut him soon, I think what they'll do is they'll bring him back for 2018 and just let him ride out the final year of this rookie deal. Again, not counting the rookie option or the fifth-year option. And anyways, so I think they're going to just ride it out and let him be the guy this year. And he'll start the last 13 games, barring any kind of injury or poor play or whatever, and they'll see what he does. And, you know, if nothing else comes out as far as the situation, nothing else happens, and if he plays the last 13 games and happens to ball out and they actually do make the playoffs, then it might be enough to save Dirk Cutter's job, more than likely. Or, well, we'll see. But as far as Jameis, then yeah, probably Tampa will say, okay, well, we picked up your fifth-year option. We'll see what happens in 2019, and if you stay out of trouble then and you play well again, with or without Dirk Cutter as a head coach, then we'll sign you a long-term extension where we can have certain outs in the contract or you get in trouble, basically. But, so I think Tampa's going to probably stick with Winston this year, but I think they should really just cut ties and just chalk this up as a lost season. I mean, they're a dysfunctional organization. Other than about an 8 or 10 year stretch in their history, they've been dysfunctional, and especially, you know, since firing John Gruden about a decade ago. So I think if you're Tampa, you should just move on. But it doesn't look like they're going to do that right now. I mean, we'll see. But I just kind of have this feeling that they're going to let Jameis play another year. So we'll see. But anyhow, that's all I got for this video. Again, visit the Sugar Huddle, TheSugarHuddle.com. This is where I've been writing all these stories, and I'm planning on once we get closer to the season, writing a lot more stories on them, if not a daily basis, a several days a week type basis. But right now it's kind of hard to put out content because of the time of year it is. So once we get closer and closer to the season, we get in the training camp, do more with that, and then, like I said, college football. Probably be focusing more on the NFL, but again, it says that the website says that it covers college football, and I like to start doing stuff on college football. But again, until stuff actually happens, I mean, what is there to really say right now? It's kind of too early to start really doing previews, in my opinion. So I'll start touching on college football more when we get close to the season. But anyways, thesugarhuddle.com is my website. For now, my YouTube channel is just called Eric Murray. As you're seeing this video on, but I'm gonna try to post more content and more videos in the future. So we'll see. But thanks for watching, and talk to you again soon.